is so precariously balanced on a windowsill right now. If it falls, that is why it's, yeah, it's teetering. So I wanted to talk about fuel prorations, and this is something that comes up at the very beginning of a transaction and the very end of a transaction, and we all just kind of forget about it in between. I always like to talk about things that are going on in my actual transactions at the moment, and fuel is one of them because I've got a bunch of closings coming up. So you're a seller, you have your fuel maybe on automatic delivery. The process for selling is stressful, it's all encompassing on your brain, and you get a bill hanging on your front door 5 days before the closing saying that the oil company came and filled up your tank to the tune of, I mean, what is it nowadays? Like $800? I don't know. I always feel like it's a huge bill when I get my oil bill. But how this is handled, so it's really important to pay attention when you get an offer from a buyer, if this is important to you, to see whether the buyer plans on paying for the oil or not. Now, depending on what state you're in, we have actual check boxes on the contract, or it's something that can be written in, but something that you should be cognizant of. And it goes for any kind of fuel. I'm just using oil as an example. So at the end of the transaction, if the buyer is paying for the fuel in the tank, because fuel is a commodity, it's traded separately from the actual house. So if the buyer is paying for the fuel, what happens is Nichole Fecteau goes out in the absolute wrong shoes and trudges through the snow like I did yesterday to go read the gauge on your tanks. And then we call the company, the last company to deliver. So yesterday I had to call about kerosene, oil, and propane, 3 different companies. So we call the last company that delivered, and they usually know based on your address, like what rate you usually get. And then we do a calculation that, I mean, honestly, we try to get it as accurate as possible, but I am not an expert at measuring the fuel in tanks. I often forget how big an actual tank is. And then when you have oil tanks, they want you to consider the fact that there's like 25 gallons of sludge on the bottom of the tank. So subtract that. I don't know. It's one of those things. I am not a fan of fuel prorations, but obviously I have to do them. So anyway, we do the calculation, and if we're lucky, we can get it onto the closing disclosure. So it's just all paid for in your closing costs at closing. And if we are unlucky, then the buyer is faced with an extra bill at their closing, and they're sitting there writing a check to the seller for the fuel that is in the tank. But that's basically how it goes. And sometimes the seller will forget that on the purchase and sale agreement, the buyer did not agree to reimburse. And when it comes to the end of the transaction, if there's a ton of fuel in the tank, then either the buyer gets it, or I have actually had sellers have it pumped out, which is crazy to me, but hey, it happens. Anyway, that's what happens with the fuel proration. If you have any questions, please give me a call or a buzz today. I am in our Wells main office. Stay tuned. I'm definitely doing an MTV Cribs video of this place because it's pretty cool. Have a great day.